What does it mean to be truly wealthy? Well, in this episode of the Change Your Minds podcast, I want to answer that question by diving into two important types of wealth that will allow you to be able to improve the quality of your life no end. Now, we're going to be focusing on a very powerful book known as The 5 Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. Sahil Bloom was a creator and investor that back in 2021 or so started up a newsletter called The Curiosity Chronicle. And it's an excellent newsletter. He sends it out multiple times a week. And in it, he talks about different aspects of your life and how to be able to optimize the different parts of your life. Because his argument is that financial wealth is not enough. And in this episode, we're going to focus on 2 types of wealth that Sahil Bloom talks about. And then in next week's episode, we're going to go into the other 3. But today, we're going to talk about your time wealth and your social wealth. This is really about how do you manage your time? How do you use your time? And how do you manage your relationships as well? And by the end of this episode of the Change Your Minds podcast, you're going to learn so many different ideas and insights as to how you can start to organize your social life, your relationships, as well as your time, such that you can start to become truly wealthy. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Change Your Minds podcast. My name is Alan Fitzpatrick, and in this particular episode, we're going to be exploring The 5 Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. It's a great book that really is focused on the fact that really many people focus almost entirely or exclusively on financial wealth. It's like, if I can only become rich, that's what defines success. And his argument is, or the core premise of the book is that modern society's fixation on money is the sole measure of happiness, or the sole measure of success, rather, is misguided. And it's critical that we learn how we can start to take control over the different areas of our life, the different aspects of our life more successfully. Now, obviously, there's been lots of different discussions about this over the years, but I did find that the book is very straightforward, some really nice. Sahil is a great way to write. He can take concepts that you might have known of before, and the way in which he writes about them brings a fresh edge and a new way of thinking about them. So I find it extremely easy to walk through. I think it's a perfect type of book to explore at the beginning of this particular year. So I think you'll find it really, really helpful. And we're going to do this in 2 sections. Next week, we're going to do 3 more types of wealth. But today, we're going to focus on the first 2 types of wealth that Sahil talks about in the book. But we're going to start by talking about this notion. And as I mentioned, the core premise is that modern society's fixation on financial wealth is, too much and too strong and too oriented towards, if only I have money, then I'll be successful. And we use that as the barometer as to how successful we are is only based upon money. And his argument is that we need a number of different types of wealth. And at the heart of the 5 types of wealth, he says that something along the lines of your wealthy life may be enabled by money, but it will be defined by everything else. And by everything else, he's talking about how you manage your time, how you manage relationships, which are the 2 elements we'll be talking about today. And then next week, we'll look at other aspects such as your mental wealth, your physical wealth, of course. And then finally, we'll talk about financial wealth and how they all fit together as well. But just to start off with, the psychology behind the idea or the concept in this really comes down to the notion of what he calls the arrival fallacy. And the arrival fallacy is this notion that once I achieve this, then I'll be there. If you've ever set a goal for yourself, like once I'm a speaker, once I get paid for a speech, or for me, it would be once I get bestseller in this category, or once I speak on stage alongside this person or that person, or once I have a business that earns this amount of money, then I'll be successful, then I'll be happy, then I will have arrived. And he argues that this really never happens. And this is because of what we call the hedonic treadmill. And this is a notion in psychology whereby your baseline of happiness doesn't change much no matter what happens in your life. So through good times and bad times, and there's a number of different studies around this, but it's the idea that whenever you have a bad event, sure, it will negatively impact your levels of happiness for a while, but then you'll bounce back to the same level as you were before. In other words, it's not that once I reach this, then I'll be sufficiently happy. Once I reach that, then all my dreams will come true and I'll be sorted and happy from there on in. So this notion of the hedonic treadmill is that no matter what we think, just pursuing financial success and just pursuing a more inverted commas successful life is not necessarily going to bring us the happiness that we needed to. Instead, what we need to do is see that financial wealth can often be the tool or the vehicle that allows us to have other forms of wealth. But we need to not just prioritize our financial wealth, but also prioritize other types of wealth as well. Sahil interviewed people that are quite old and asked them what advice they would give to their younger selves. And the answers that he got were about love, were about relationships, were about time spent with loved ones over material success. I'm pretty sure no one said, I wish I worked harder and I wish I put in more hours in the office. A lot of them talked about the other things. So with that notion, it's the idea of the wisdom from these elders provides you with the perspective you need, because just because you think it's important now doesn't necessarily mean it'll be important in the long run. And if you look and learn from the folks that are a lot older, that have lived a full life, and you ask, what is it that, you wish you would have done more? What regrets might you have? Well, I know Dan Pink did a great book on the power of regret and stuff like that as something else to check out. But the idea is that we can learn a lot from the lessons of perspective from the folks that are, a lot older than us. And in terms of the actual book itself, the book itself is broken into another different section. So each type of wealth, so we start off with time wealth and the social wealth. And then, later on, then he gets into physical and mental and financial wealth. But in each of those different areas, there's a number of different sections, subsections of them. He talks about, first of all, the big question that opens up the discussion, which is a thought-provoking question. Then he goes into the history of the context of the area, some of the work around it. Then he goes into 3 pillars for each, which makes it really clear and simple. And then he has an action guide as well, which makes it really easy to be able to understand how it works and stuff like that. So it's a really good, very clean structure, which is one of the things that I really like about his work. And as I mentioned, the 5 types of wealth, it starts off with time wealth, which is really about freedom, how you spend your time, the ability to be able to choose your time and choose to use your time for the things that matter most. Social wealth, that's the strength of your connections to other people. Mental wealth, which is your inner well-being, your sense of purpose and mental clarity and that kind of thing. Then you've got physical wealth, which is obviously your health, fitness, and vitality, which will obviously fuel a lot of the other parts of your ability to enjoy life. And then we have financial wealth, which is traditional money wealth, which is assets minus liabilities, which is really the core definition that he mainly focuses on. But those are the core elements. And today we're going to talk about 2 of them. We're going to look at the time-based one and then social wealth, which is really your relationships. But we'll start off by talking about time-based wealth. And when we talk about time-based wealth, he prioritizes that because it's the most finite resource. He says you can always get a lot more and improve in other areas, but we really only have a certain amount of time. And he sort of emphasizes the notion that our time is limited and it's non-renewable as well. So as I mentioned, it starts off with a question that he starts out with. And the big question really that starts out this notion is, how many moments do you have remaining with your loved ones? And this is a very powerful question. So once again, his sort of big moment of epiphany in this was he was out with a friend of his, and his friend started asking him, asking about the question about, how much time do you have left with your parents, for instance? And when he did the calculation, because he lived across the country from them, if he sees them once a year, let's say, and let's say they lived to 80, that's only, and then they were 65, let's say, that's 15 years. So 15 more times with your parents. And that was a game changer for him. So much so that he and his wife decided to move across the country to live near his family, which I think is evident of that. But again, when you think about your loved ones, and you think about how much time you actually have, especially if you look at the graph of, how much time you spend with your kids, for instance, in the first 12, 15, 20 years. And then as soon as they reach like 16, 17, the amount of time you spend with kids rapidly deteriorates. In other words, if you were to see it on a curve, you see it like explodes at a really high level and then it rockets down. And by the time they're 20 and onwards, less and less time with your children. So they really emphasize the importance of spending the most amount of quality time you can while they're kids. And again, it's a great perspective shifter, but I really like that question about how much time do you have left to spend? It's kind of depressing in a way. And it's, for me, at least it was anxiety inducing, but sometimes that's what's needed to make decisions. And so even me, even though I live far away from my parents, I'm very close to them. They're the most important thing to me in my life. And even though I live far away, I go back and I make whatever sacrifices are necessary to see them on a regular basis and to spend whatever time I can, spend as much time as possible with them. And I think that once again, it's not something I did as a result of the book, because I've been doing it the last few years, but it's something that reinforces that and emphasizes just why that is particularly important. But he talks about 3 pillars of time wealth, and they're awareness, attention, and control. And the idea is that awareness is the foundation where you're starting to become aware of where is your time going. Recognize the awareness of the fact that your time is limited and that you need to be able to recognize that and pay attention to it. 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman is a great book all around this. It's about the notion that you have finite time, so you need to recognize the importance. And the idea is that this sparks action. It's like aware of the finite nature of your time. That's the first step. The second step then is attention. So focusing your attention on meaningful things without distraction. The problem is a lot of times our attention is scattered, and we live in a world where society is doing whatever it can, trying to be able to get our attention on whatever it is that it deems to be valuable. So in other words, you go on social media, you go on the media, and it's an attention game. And so we have to control our attention in this situation. If we allow our attention to be controlled by outside forces, we're going to find ourselves constantly responding to the world or reacting to the world. There's also control is the ultimate goal. This is to be able to create freedom in terms of choosing how to spend your time and where to put your attention on, and be more of a time maker as opposed to a time taker. And he talks about the Red Queen effect, which is the interesting one. This comes from Alice in Wonderland, or actually the sequel, I think, to Alice in Wonderland, where it's the notion of, they're running or something, and they're running around and they keep going faster and faster, but they're only just keeping up with the speed of the world around them. So they're never actually getting anywhere. And as a result of it, this sort of feeling of constantly running faster and working more hours but never actually accomplishing anything, we get the time-saving technology like emails or whatever. And all that means is, back in the day, you send a letter, you had to wait a few days. Now we can send an email, we can wait a few seconds in order to get responses. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're getting to the place we need to get to. It just means we can do more. But oftentimes we're doing more, and the more technology we have, the faster we run. But it doesn't necessarily mean we get to our particular destination anyway quick. So the idea is to run smarter, to be more effective. And as Sahil talks about, the importance of using high leverage actions. In other words, actions that will allow us to be able to do a lot or go a lot further with the time that we spend. So let's take, for example, using AI is an example. High leverage activity is to understand at a high level strategically, how is it that I could use AI such that my workload becomes less, or I can get things done faster? Where are the areas where I need to do my own form of thinking, and where are the areas that AI is best suited? So learning about where AI works best and how you can start to structure it into your workflow, that would be an example of a high leverage activity, as with sometimes building relationships that you have with important people, which we'll get to again. Outcomes tend to follow attention. So the idea is that concentrated attention is what we want to achieve, where we want to get to. Sahil talks about Warren Buffett's two-list exercise, notion sort of around ruthless prioritization. And he says that you write down 25 life or career goals that you want to focus on and accomplish. This is a very interesting one, actually. And I hadn't heard of this before. You circle your top 5 goals, the absolute highest priorities. So again, we're good on that. We know that. And then you create 2 lists. List A is the 5 circled items, and then list B contains the 20 uncircled items. So again, you make a list of 25 career life goals that you want to achieve, and then you circle the 5 most important ones, and the other 20 are left alone. And then most people assume you work on list A, and then you work on list B whenever you can. But Buffett says everything you didn't circle becomes your avoid at all costs. And this is a very interesting thing. So the notion is that you put in, what's important, and you focus on that, and then what's not important, and that's all good. And we'll talk about Eisenhower matrix in a bit. But in this one, Buffett's saying, no. The problem with these 20 items is that you do want to achieve them, and that makes them more tempting. So because they're more tempting, they're the very thing that's most likely to get in the way of the 5. And so he says, it's really important to avoid these at all costs. They're dangerous distractions if you don't. So I thought that was quite a profound suggestion or strategy. The energy calendar is another sort of idea. Most productivity systems tend to focus on time management, whereas Sahil talks about how energy management is actually more important. You sort of create an energy calendar and you color code your calendar. And if it's green, it means that's an energy creating action. If it's red, it means it's energy draining. And if it's yellow, then it's neutral. And what you do is you color code all the activities you have for the week. And you start to go, which of these give me energy, which of these drain my energy, and which of these are neutral. And the notion is that you're trying to create more green activities. Or if you do have some red that are just unavoidable, you make sure that there's green either side of them and stuff like that. So it's an interesting take, but I think it's an important take because so often we focus on tasks and actions and time, but energy definitely matters. And there's certain actions, like for example, anything creative gives me energy. Well, I could work like that all day. Whereas there's certain types, like doing my finances or taxes, so I'm like, it drains me. So what I'll do is I'll reward myself as a result of doing the work that I don't want to do in that context. Sahil also talks about index cards and the notion of a 3x5 index card, and write down the 3 most important tasks for the day and focus only on those, which again is another cool strategy. And putting it out there in a physical form, he suggests tends to be quite useful. He also breaks things down in terms of the 4 types of professional time. Management time is what people spend most of the time in. These are meetings, calls, presentations, email processing, team management. And this is necessary and productive, but it also can create a focus on movement rather than progress. So it's like, I need to do these things as opposed to this will actually help me go forward. The second type is what he calls creation time. This is really what is about writing, creating, coding, building. When I write my newsletters, when I create these podcasts, that's the creation time that propels you forward, which is great. The next time is consumption time. That's about what you take in, new ideas for growth and all that sort of stuff when you're learning. And then there's ideation time, and that's really coming up with new idea, reflecting on life. A lot of times this will happen when you're walking or you're running, or I find a lot of times when I'm running, I'm either consuming or I'm in ideation time. I'm either coming up with ideas if I'm listening to music or I'm not listening to anything for the longer runs. And then for the other runs, I'm listening to podcasts and I'm consuming information, not just in those situations. But once again, he kind of argues that it's really important to make it so that you batch management time. So all the stuff that you have to do, you try to do it in one go. So you're not like context switching or task switching. He talks about increased creation time by blocking distinctive windows and giving yourself windows to create, right? Like I'm doing right now with regards to the podcast episodes. Never neglect consumption ideation time. So, don't see ideation time as just mind wandering, or consumption time as, eventually I'll get to studying this. We want to make sure we see them as valid forms of building it. And so time wealth overall is the notion of focusing on the quality of time, not just the quantity of time. So a lot of great techniques in there, a lot of great insights that will help you to be a lot better at managing your time. And next week, when we talk about the other 3, we'll bring in some other strategies as well that will also help you with time wealth. Next, we have social wealth. And this is really about the relationships that we build or the relationships that we have. In this case, Sahil starts with another question. And this particular question is really about, when you die, who will be sitting in the front row of your funeral? When you die, who will be sitting in the front row of your funeral? It's a powerful question. Again, quite upsetting to a degree, but it's really provocative in the sense that it gets you thinking about the most important thing. And he talks about 3 types of 3 pillars of this is number 1, depth, number 2, breadth, and number 3, what he calls earned status. So if you talk about depth, this is really about the deepness or the deepest connections you have with the 3 to 7 people that form your inner circle, the most important people that are in your life. That is really the first category. And for these, you want to make sure that you're showing up for them, you're making sacrifices for them, that you're reaching out to them, you're ensuring that you're nurturing and nourishing those relationships. The deep relationships are critically important for your overall well-being and happiness. Then the breadth one, this is based upon the notion of what sociologists call loose connections, which is surprisingly good in terms of helping us to find more opportunities. These loose connections or weak ties allows us to be able to reach out to more people. So in your wider network, we want to make sure that you're cultivating every opportunity you have to create a decent relationship. The more people that you know at a certain level allows you to be able to find more opportunities, make more of an impact, and open yourself up to more opportunities, more situations where you might find yourself connecting with the right person at the right time. So once again, we don't just focus on our 3 to 7 people and depth. We also focus on breadth as well. And then finally, he talks about earned status. This is the reputation or the status that you've earned based upon the amount of money you've made or the title that you have or what you've won, awards you've gotten, something that you've accomplished that positions you with certain status that gets you in front of people. So once again, by being successful in some area, that will help you to reach out and connect with people and get like inner circle invites and the opportunity to go into rooms, the room where it happens, as the famous musical Hamilton would say. So it gives you the opportunity to be able to step into those rooms as well. Now, he talks about a relationship map where he looks at assessing the quality of relationships and the frequency of relationships. So there's supportive, there's ambivalent, there's demeaning. So you've got people in your life that are supportive and great for you. There's people that are, ambivalent and it is what it is. And then there's people that are more demeaning, which is obviously people that we sometimes describe them as toxic, right? And then there's the frequency, whether or not you interact with them daily, whether you do it weekly, whether you do it monthly, whether you do it rarely, every now and then. And so his notion is that you create 4 zones from this. You create what's known as the green zone, the opportunity zone, the danger zone, and the red zone. And so the green zone is people that are supportive and that you see frequently. And these are people that you want to prioritize, of course. Then there's opportunity zone. This is people that are supportive, but they're infrequent. You don't see them very often. Then there's people in the sort of the danger zone, which is people that are, ambivalent and, frequent enough. So not necessarily good for you, whatnot. And then obviously there's the red zone. These are people that are demeaning and frequent. And these are people that you want to try to cut out of your life. Now, you might not be able to do it, but what you want to do is you want to either reduce the amount of time that you spend with people in the danger zone or the red zone. And if you can't limit the amount of time, you got to do what you can to transform the relationship. Obviously, ideally, you want to be able to cut ties as well, whenever that's appropriate, but it's not always possible. Sometimes the toxicity is coming from your boss or it's coming from someone in your family, and it's just, will create more hassle than not to disconnect from them. So it means that you might need to transform the relationship or do whatever it is that you can do to be able to make the changes necessary that you need to make. He talks about when you're working with people or dealing with people, really thinking through 3 things whenever people are expressing. And this is a particularly nice little framework, is that if someone is talking to you about their problems, you really want to know, do they need to be heard? Do they need to be hugged? Or do they need to be helped? Right? So it's help is, I'll give you practical advice. Hug is, I'll just be there for you and, give you love. And then heard is, you'll feel heard and you'll be able to vent to me in a psychologically safe place. So again, helped, heard, or hugged allows you to be able to identify what the other person wants or needs in that moment in time. Then we've got the brain trust tool. This is building a personal brain trust where you pick 5 to 10 people who want you to succeed and who can help you, maybe advisors that will offer you unbiased perspectives and give you support. And you can sort of create that. Now, they don't even have to know about each other, but it's just people that you can go to as sort of mentors, like a mentor group that you build for yourself as well. And finally, Sal talks about love languages and the work of John and Julie Gottman. I've talked about this at length in different episodes of the podcast, but the love languages are Gary Chapman's framework for, different people in different ways in which that makes them feel loved. They have words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. And it's about understanding what the folks that are in your life, how they like to be loved, and make it so that they know how you like to be loved, and therefore it helps you both improve that relationship. And also, John Gottman talks about the things that dictate whether or not a relationship will or won't last. Things like criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. So again, you want to avoid things like criticism where it's like they're attacking the person as opposed to the behavior, or defensiveness. They're always reacting. They're never wrong and they're always defending themselves. Or contempt. They look at you with the sort of a disrespect, or stonewalling. They refuse to actually engage with you. Those are the kind of warning signs. It doesn't mean that your relationship is doomed, but it means that you want to avoid them as much as possible. They're known as the 4 horsemen of the relationship apocalypse, I believe, by John Gottman. So great insights there. And I think if you take a lot of the ideas of ways in which you can start to master your time, ways in which you can start to master your relationships from this book, you'll find it very, very useful. So definitely recommend getting a copy of The 5 Types of Wealth, but hopefully this has been a good intro. And in the next episode of the Change Your Minds podcast, we're going to dive into the other 3. We'll talk about mental wealth, we'll talk about physical wealth, and we'll talk about financial wealth as well. So by the end of this, you'll have all you need to be wealthy in all aspects of your life. But for now, hope this has been useful. Take care, be well, may the forces always be with you, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.